Hello, greetings from here from Cairo, from the Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peacebuilding, which also acts as the secretariat of the Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development. My name is Ahmed Abdellatif. I'm the Director General of the CCCPA and also the Executive Director of the Aswan Forum. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all, participants and speakers and attendees, to this panel discussion entitled Africa and Europe Together Towards an Effective Operational Partnership for Sustainable Peace and Development. We had a wonderful set of panelists with us to address this issue, and I would like to mention them, introduce them briefly. Ambassador Bernard Quentin, the Deputy Managing Director for Africa at the European External Action Service. Ms. Otilia Anna Monganidze, the Head of Special Projects at the Office of the Executive Director of ISS, the Institute for Security Studies, which is also a partner of CCCPA and of the Aswan Forum. And we are waiting to be joined also imminently by Monsieur Jean-Denis Gabikini, the Acting Director of Economic Development, Trade and Integration of the African Union Commission. I will start by doing some opening remarks to set the stage for our discussion, and then start by giving the floor to Ambassador Bernard Quentin. I think, we've all seen that the pandemic and the responses to pandemic highlight the imperative for stronger and deeper partnership. These are more critical today than ever in the process of rebuilding better and recovering from COVID in the context of advancing sustainable peace and development in Africa. In reality, already since the first Aswan Forum that was held in 2019, the forum called for more robust partnerships that are impact-driven and that place greater emphasis on coherent planning and operational complementarity at the country, at the regional level, and to advance at the operational level also concrete actions in specific contexts. Also, the Aswan Forum called to expand these partnerships beyond a focus on traditional security and crisis management towards a broader framework of sustaining peace lens and advancing a more holistic approach to sustainable peace and development. And I think at the second edition of the Aswan Forum that was held earlier in March, it further reinforced this message, but positioning in the broader context, as I mentioned, of rebuilding better. The forum highlighted the importance of strengthening partnership that strengthen the resilience of African societies and economies in the face of the pandemic, and that also address and take forward the interlinkages between all the complex challenges. I think COVID showed the interlinkages between security, development, sustainable development challenges in a very important way that maybe was not the case before. And I think partnerships need to adapt to these new contexts, to these new responses and challenges. And I think, of course, the EU is a key partner for Africa on many of these issues. 2020 was supposed to be the new year of the Africa-EU strategic partnership. However, due to COVID-19, this renewal has been put on halt temporarily. But I think it's important to continue to reflect on it and how can the Africa-EU partnership be taken forward, the opportunities and challenge towards a more collaborative and operational partnership that also supports African priorities such as Agenda 2063, the Silencing the Gun Roadmap, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the policy of reconstruction and development. So these are the set of challenges that we will be looking at in the context of this panel, the opportunities to do so in the context of this new normal, and how also it is seize the opportunity a bit to think outside the box, to adapt our tools and to see how they are fit for the new and unprecedented challenges we are facing today. So having said that, I will start with you, Ambassador Bernard Quentin. As you're aware, I mean, the African Union has shown important leadership in addressing the the health challenges of COVID-19, but at the same time, it has really felt the burden of the socioeconomic implications, the socioeconomic effects have been very far-reaching, have impacted the growth prospects of the region. The IMF issued its quarterly report on ensuring that Africa would be one of the least growth regions as a result of the socio-economic impact of COVID. And at the same time, the continent also continues to face traditional security challenges, conflicts, as we see in many parts of the continent. In front of this really multifaceted challenges that come together with COVID, new challenges, old challenges, how is the EU a bit retooling, recalibrating its partnership with Africa in this new context, and particularly in terms of also supporting the African Union agenda and priorities in addressing this crisis? Thank you, Ambassador. A pleasure to have you. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, Director General. Thank you for inviting me, first of all. My colleague, the Director General, Rita Laranja, should be here, but actually she is on a mission in Addis Abeba. She had a bilateral agenda, and now she's for 2 days in contact with the African Union. So just to highlight the fact that this relation with the African Union is definitely paramount for us. Just because, and let me state the obvious: it's Africa, Europe's closest neighbor, is an indispensable partner for the EU. So it's our strong interest and well understood to foster our relationship and to go to an even closer partnership with Africa regarding multilateralism, peace, security and stability, sustainable and inclusive development, and sustainable economic growth. I should begin to excuse me with my voice. I'm losing it, so I hope it will be okay till the end of my presentation. Well, we are partner also. I spoke about multilateralism because if you join the EU member states and the African countries, we represent 40% of the UN's membership. So it means that we have a shared responsibility to shape the global agenda, and let us hope that's our goal for the better. We adopt a new communication, I cite, towards a comprehensive strategy with Africa. It was adopted before the COVID, but what we adopted at the time, it's really and definitely very interesting also, and maybe even more for the post-COVID world, as you mentioned, that will require a lot of efforts to rebuild, and let us hope to build back better, as we say in the new vocabulary. In this joint communication, we have 5 partnerships: green transition and energy access, 1. Second is the digital transformation. Then sustainable growth and jobs. 4th, peace, security and governance. 5th, migration and mobility. Those are the 5 partnerships that we are proposing. In this world, as you say, it's shaken by the COVID-19 pandemic, issues of a fair and equitable access to vaccines, support to health system, and of a coordinated international approach on debt restructuring and relief efforts for African countries will undoubtedly feature prominently among the key priorities. Well, we had to postpone the 6th EU-AU summit and also the EU-AU ministerial meeting due to the pandemic, but preparation are still ongoing in close cooperation with our AU partner. I mentioned the mission of my colleague in Addis Abeba today. This is part of the agenda, obviously. Consultation and outreach is key at this moment, and we propose our vision for a stronger partnership with Africa. We have to engage with our African partners in order to take into account their objective to set an agenda for the forthcoming summit and to establish the desired outcome for both parties. It is important, You will hear us speak more and more about mutual interest, mutual vision, mutual accountability. It is really important. We want to put the focus more and more on that mutual accent. In the run-up to the next summit, we have therefore been undergoing extensive consultation, building on the main thematic partnership. If I focus a bit on peace, security, and stability, important part of our partnership with Africa. Let me start with a few figures very quickly to illustrate this. We are busy from the Sahel to the Horn, from Bangui to Cabo Delgado. So we are almost busy everywhere on that side of peace, security, and stability. The African Peace Facility has spent more than 3 billion euros over the last 16 years. We have 10 CSDP missions, so military and civilian mission, with close to 2,000 European soldiers, police officers, and other civil servants. These missions provide advice and training to more than 30,000 African military, police, and judicial system. We also, as you know, invest heavily in the G5 Sahel Joint Force and also in the AMISOM in Somalia, and we are the main financial supporter of Africa-led peace initiatives. Excuse me. Various programs in around 30 countries to support conflict resolution and prevention. Not last and certainly not least, the creation of a new instrument. So the African Peace Facility is now replaced by the European Peace Facility that will enable us to be more effective. It fills a long-standing gap between our capacity to train and our limited ability so far to equip third parties' armed forces. And that was a strong demand from our African partners. So it is a strong demand that has been taken on board. It will allow us to continue supporting African Union-led peace support operation in Africa, but for the first time, it will allow us to engage also bilaterally with partners. Obviously, we need to deepen even further our cooperation in these areas. First, why? Because what happens in Africa impacts Europe and vice versa. Instability and insecurity in Africa is not limited to Africa. So ensuring long-lasting peace and security of Africa is a shared interest. This is important also that we speak of interest. It is not a vulgar notion. It's we have to be clear on our interests, and then we can have this mutually benefiting relation. Second, African solution to African problems. The African states, supported by regional and continental organizations, should be the main actors of their own stability and security. No solution can be imposed from the outside. It was Ottilia, one of the motto of Jackie yesterday, and I really think it's important. The African and every country, every society has to define what they want, and we are there to support that, to speak about that, to see how we can support the solution that will be designed by the African for themselves. Third, the need to adapt. We in Europe as well as in Africa are faced with a changing nature of threats. We therefore need to adapt our working methods accordingly to address issues such as terrorism, hybrid threats, or cybercrime. A better link between our CSDP mission and African-led peace support operation is also expected. If we want to be effective in tackling increasingly complex situations, we need to evolve towards a more strategic cooperation. Turning to the EU only to finance after decisions are taken, it's not a partnership we want, as it will not allow us to activate in a coherent manner our political, security, development, and humanitarian action. Maybe on our side, we also should be even more listening to. It is the aim of our mutual approach, as I stated already before. This more strategic approach should also be driven by another principle. We are not, and we do not want to be firefighters who are there only to try to extinguish violent fires. We need to work on conflict prevention and on reconstruction using the numerous tools we have at our disposal for doing so. But really, we do not want to be seen, we do not want to do and do not want to be seen as just busy when there is a crisis. There are a lot of parts of Africa where there are not violent crises, And those are also very important partners with whom we have to build something and hope that it will help solve the other problems in the other parts of the continent. It is also clear that there is no peace and security without development, and vice versa. Everything we do in the areas of peace and security are crucial building blocks to deploy or other tools and policies and build with Africa the strength and multidimensional partnership we all hope for. Good governance and democracy are intimately related to and crucial enabling factors for sustainable development and sustainable peace. I'm sorry, Ottilia, I will repeat what I said yesterday, but I think it's important. The rule of law is paramount, and I really always try to state that I'm even a little bit puzzled that when we speak about rule of law, it's always at the end of the sentence. We speak of human rights, good governance, etc., and the rule of law. And I really plea for a change just in the sense of the sentence. The rule of law should be at the beginning of the sentence, because without rule of law, we won't have the rest. That the rest and human rights, good governance are paramount also, but we have to build on the rule of law. Afrobarometer survey consistently confirmed that African citizens overwhelmingly support the democratic model of government and ask for more democratic participation and governance. Nonetheless, recent indicators show that democracy and good governance have suffered with the pandemics. Just look to the last Mo Ibrahim index. I won't quote him, we all read it, and we were all a little bit worried about that. Democratic accountability and transparency are guarantors and improved governance, itself guarantor of sustainable development, peace and security. The EU will therefore continue supporting the implementation of the African governance architecture based on the African Charter on Democracy, Election and Governance. Human rights, very important, as I say. The EU strongly supports the promotion and defense of human rights in Africa, as well as the promotion of international humanitarian law and the important role of human rights organ play in this endeavor. Our financial engagement in this respect is significant, with a support program for the strengthening and the development of the African governance architecture worth 25 million. We also attach special value and importance to the yearly AU-EU Human Rights Dialogue, a forum through which we can exchange experiences and promote human rights on our two continents. Ensuring a balanced, coherent, and comprehensive approach is needed to address the challenges and opportunities also of migration and mobility in accordance with EU and national competencies and respecting international law, including human rights. Since 2015, EU and African partners have developed a joint approach to managing migration and mobility, including through the Valletta Action Plan, the Rabat and Khartoum processes, and the EU Partnership Framework on Migration for bilateral relations with partner countries. The EU and AU share a commitment to develop a joint framework on the continent-to-continent dialogue. Let me conclude. The strategic importance of the EU-Africa partnership is a fact. And as we say, a fact is stronger than the Lord Mayor. So it is a fact. It has to be seen like that and in this mutual approach, as I stated. We do believe the next summit should mark the dawn of a new era in this EU-Africa relationship if we prepare it well towards this objective. And we have to prepare it together. Together with our African partners, we want to develop a comprehensive strategy to frame and guide our partnership and make it fit to tackle the challenges of the 21st centuries. Together, we can build a more prosperous, more peaceful, and more sustainable future for all citizens. Together, we can make sure we are able to recover better for the socio-economic shocks of the COVID-19 pandemic. Together, we can build on our common values and a shared commitments to regional integration and effective multilateralism. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. A very comprehensive overview of the different areas of engagement and of the strategic nature of the EU-Africa partnership. And I think you outlined a very comprehensive number of issues. But maybe in the next round, before going to the next speaker, if I could push you a bit, thinking when we come a bit to the next round of exchanges a bit, two issues a bit. What has COVID made, how has COVID impacted a bit the EU partnership towards Africa in a different manner, in doing things differently, and in particular in addressing the socioeconomic impacts on the African continent in terms of debt relief, in terms of fiscal pressures, and how, because these also affect peace and security and the environment of that. So maybe this issue, and maybe a bit the second issue that maybe we could get back to is, as I said, COVID shows that and highlights, and you mentioned it also, the interdependence of issues, of challenges of migration, humanitarian issues, the peace and security architecture, governance, and our partnerships tooled, equipped to deal with this complexity, with this interdependence. And this is a question that we reflected and we also posed in the Stockholm Forum, and we're trying a bit to take it forward in this case in the context of EU. So in these issues, maybe on the next round we could come back to them. And thank you again. And I'll have the pleasure of giving the floor to Otilia Anna Monganitse, as I mentioned, the head of special projects at the Office of the Executive Director of ISS. Otilia, understand that ISS hosted last year an Africa-EU discussion partnership, and again, in a similar vein, looking from the African continent side, I mean, how can we ensure that the partnership advances African ownership and African priorities that have been mentioned from, the rebuilding the COVID recovery, the African Continental Free Trade Area, the silencing the guns, all this set of the initiatives that are captured in Agenda 2063. What can we do better? Can we do differently, particularly in the current unprecedented context we are facing? Thank you. Over to you.
Shukran, Ahmed. Importantly, I think, and I thank Bernard in this regard for his earlier remarks, speaking to questions of partnership, commitment, communication, and consultation. And perhaps the last point he made now, which relates to accepting facts and accepting reality. Now, in the spirit of accepting these facts and realities, we know without a doubt that at the moment, 7 out of the 12 UN peacekeeping operations are on the African continent. 4 of those, which make up 4 of the 5 most complex situations, are in Africa. They are the Central African Republic, the DRC, Mali, as well as South Sudan. And these are contexts in which not only the UN and the African Union are engaged, but also the European Union through financial, technical, and other support. This support is not limited to peacekeeping operations, but also includes, for example, the engagement with the multinational joint task force dealing with the threat of Boko Haram in the Lake Chad Basin, but also the G5 Sahel dealing with the crisis, particularly centered around Mali, of violent extremism and terrorism. But it goes beyond that. And I think I start there as my point of departure, because we can speak about partnerships as a future thing, when the reality is partnerships are our current circumstances, and whether or not we want it, it has to do with our proximity. And it has to do with the fact that issues that are playing out in West Africa, in Central Africa, in the Horn, have an impact southwards also, but also northwards. So geography is what brings us here. And ultimately, the need to ensure secure spaces at local, national, and regional level mean we have no choice but to partner. So what then do we say of African ownership, recognizing that these crises play themselves out on the African continent? Ultimately, the first port of call when it comes to responding to crises at national level will be the national government. Where there is, Bernard, you'll love to hear this, the rule of law, good governance, democracy, allowing for stronger responses, that is ideal. The reality is that's not always the case, and the need for support from neighboring countries comes into play. I cite the example of another peacekeeping mission at the moment on the African continent that is not yet regarded as one of the complex situations. And that is the situation in the northern region of Mozambique in Cabo Delgado. At the moment, as the Southern African region seeks to find a response to the crisis in Mozambique, they will have to do so with the great support of the African Union and also of other actors that play out in Mozambique, but that are also, in some regards, part of the solution. Now, why do I mention the SADC leaders or the Southern African Development Community in this regard? Because often when we have conversations about a trilateral partnership, in mentioning Africa through the African Union, we don't always reference the regional economic communities and mechanisms, which are key building blocks to the way in which Africa can respond. The African Union, through its commission, has no way that it can be able to respond to all crises speedily, effectively, and efficiently without the support of national and regional intervention. And so I'm here to say, while we can speak about a trilateral partnership between the UN, the AU, and the EU, we have to recognize that each of these blocks comes with its own elements. The European Union comes with its member states, as well as the range of other institutions that it supports. The African Union comes with its regional economic communities, its mechanisms, but also supported by the AU Commission itself. The UN cannot intervene in any of the African countries without the buy-in and the support of the African Union. So, and I'll wrap up here, Ahmed, by focusing on what needs to happen. Bernard spoke about the need for consultation in the process. And I would say that consultation has to be the first step. We cannot have a new pact or a partnership agreement with the African Union or with African member states in which they were not part of the design of those key elements. Whether it's responding to issues of migration and displacement, climate change and human security, or issues related to violent extremism, transnational criminality, international crime and conflict. These are all issues that the African continent deals with directly. For a number of people, whether they're in Mali, the DRC, the Central African Republic, Somalia, Mozambique, South Sudan, they don't have the option to not pay attention. And so ultimately, they provide the contextual analysis and know-how that will inform the framework that is built on by the African Union and the European Union together with the UN. Without that, failing which, we have responses that are not crafted to the realities on the ground. And so my final note, recognizing the important contribution that CCCPA has played in negotiating with countries in understanding post-conflict reconstruction, I personally support the move by Egypt, particularly in hosting the African Union Center for Post-Conflict Reconstruction and Development. Because we can deal with crisis now, but we also have to have a plan as to what happens once the conflict is over. Shukran, Ahmed.
Shukran, thank you very much. Thank you, Attila. Very focused intervention with some very clear recommendations at the end. And of course, I mean, thank you for mentioning post-conflict reconstruction at the end. This is something that is very close to our heart. And actually tomorrow, our second panel in the Stockholm Forum will be about AU post-conflict reconstruction and development, building again on the discussion. We had a very good session on this at Aswan, at the Aswan Forum, and we would like to take it forward further tomorrow and going more in depth on this, bearing in mind also that Egypt is currently chairing the Peace Building Commission at the United Nations, and we think that it also provides, going along what you mentioned about this trilateral partnership, AU, UN, EU, if we have also an alignment I think we need to foster an alignment, and countries can play an important role in this regard. And this is what Egypt is trying to do, at least while having the chairmanship of the Peacebuilding Commission, also of the UN. But I think Bernard also took good note of the points you mentioned, and also just to take the opportunity to mention that we have around 70 participants that are attending the session, and I invite them maybe to if they we're gonna open for questions and answers a bit in a little while, but maybe this, if they could start, if they have any questions or answers, they can start putting them forward. I would like now to turn to, we invited a commentator to this discussion, Pedro Sabra. Great to have you, Pedro. You are an assistant professor, guest assistant professor at the University Institute of Lisbon and a research fellow in the Center for International Studies. Portugal is the president of the EU currently, and it's also has a long history of engagement with Africa and partnership with a number of African countries. And we actually came in contact through actually an initiative, a conference also that you're involved in on EU-Africa partnership. And I thought Portugal also has an interesting perspective, but also as an academic that has been working also on these issues. I mean, we listen a bit to policymakers and practitioners, but we also wanted to take the opportunity to have also the perspective of someone who is engaged in analyzing and following up a bit this partnership, and how do you see it evolving, and particularly in the context of this COVID recovery and building sustainable peace and development in this context. Over to you, Pedro. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you as well for the invitation to be a part of this event. And good morning to all. In order to make the most of my time, allow me to just try and center my comments on three overall points, in order to also add to Ambassador Quentin and Dr. Atilia's remarks. And in terms of thinking about this partnership, as you mentioned, I do tend to cover quite a lot from an academic point of view, how the EU-Africa partnership has evolved over the years. But I do believe a first point has to be made in terms of forcing us to try and overcome this symmetry emphasis that we constantly seem to impose on ourselves and on our expectations about what both parties can achieve and what they can plan ahead. And I think we need to think of a way in order to ensure that the results of this partnership are not only necessarily tied to this kind of high-level events. And on that front, of course, the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union was very much keen on trying to make the summit that had been postponed in the last semester and make it happen this semester, especially because Portugal had been, as you mentioned, very much associated with the previous EU-Africa summits. But at the same time, I think we need to be realistic about what these summits represents. They are very useful because they tend to force each part and each side to raise to the occasion, to deliver results, to make sure that there are schedules and calendars and concrete deadlines and goals to attain. But at the same time, I think we also sometimes get too attached to the calendar, to the schedule itself, and we overlook a bit the need to maintain a regular, hefty, productive rhythm of work between both sides when trying to move forward the relations. And so even though it's not clearly everything, I think we do place quite a lot of premium on the public perception surrounding the organization of this kind of summits. And of course, the Portuguese presidency would very much like to maintain the calendar in itself. But I do think we need to start requiring a bit more of results on a mid-level domain instead of just focusing that much on a high-level plane. And a second point that I would like to make on a more operational side, and picking up a bit what Ambassador Quentin and Dr. Atilia also just remarked, I also think that we need to ensure that the tools available do fit the needs and circumstances of the different scenarios that they are aimed to tackle in the first place. We have to ensure they do also not incite doubts about its intended effectiveness in terms of what happens on the ground, and that they also are able to reflect the amount of fast-paced security developments that we are now witnessing a bit in terms of some of the scenarios that Dr. Attilia just mentioned. And here, Ambassador Quentin also mentioned the issue of the European Peace Facility and how it just was formalized or finally formalized this semester. But I also think that we need to be increasingly transparent and forthcoming about how this kind of mechanisms indeed tend to work and are intended to work in the coming future, in order to ensure that there are no misconceptions about how existing funding partnerships with African partners might be impacted or not. At the same time, still operationally, but I do believe that, for example, the mandates of existing CSDP missions, they need to start better reflecting the new challenges that we are constantly facing right now. And I'm thinking specifically in terms of climate change and how that might affect existing conflicts and it also possible outcomes in that regard. And in that area, Portugal has placed quite a considerable priority. Its motto for the presidency, time to deliver, a fair, green and digital recovery, very much places the issue of climate change at the forefront of the agenda. But I also think that we need to be more serious about including in operational missions and to think of how existing mandates need to be adjusted in that regard. And a third and final example of how we have to be more demanding from an operational point of view in terms of the partnership itself. Dr. Attilia mentioned the case of Mozambique, and I think that is actually a very good case that not only showcases the Portuguese government's interest in making sure that it figures high, both in terms of the EU and in terms of the EU-African partnership and consultations, but it also shows how we need to have tools that better reflect this kind of fast-pacing and emerging crisis that can catch parties off guard and suddenly degenerate in an increasing humanitarian crisis. And the final point that I like to make in this regard is that I also think from experience and from analyzing this kind of issues, but I do think that we tend to see EU-Africa as relations as sometimes existing in a vacuum. And I do believe that we have to also overcome that misconception. EU-African relations do not exist in a vacuum, nor do they exist in isolation from the rest of the world, and even less so from other overtures by third parties. And so I do believe that we have to keep in mind that both the African Union, both the regional communities, all remaining African countries, they continue to be very much sought out for other kind of high-level partnerships of the kind. And therefore, the EU is one amongst many. It might offer something additional, something that other third parties might not bring to the table, but nevertheless, the EU and Europe as a whole still needs to make a better case about its added benefit, what it brings to the table. And here, allow me to conclude very briefly with just how I think dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic end up affecting all this. We need to avoid just mere reactions, and we need to see more concrete actions by both parties, but we also need to ensure that they both assume the narrative and the initiative. And in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic, it affected very much some of the initial goals that were sought out for 2020 and 2021, but they still represent as well an opportunity to try and innovate a bit in terms of the tools and in terms of the possible outcomes that the partnership itself can deliver in this regard. And I think I stick to my time, but I would end it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pedro. I think very good points and specific points, and glad that you also focused on the operational level, because that is also something that I mentioned in my opening remarks. I mean, I think we tend to speak quite sometimes generally about these partnerships, but it's the operational level that is important also to bear in mind, and to ensure that the effectiveness at that level in particular. So I think these were the earlier points I think are very well noted. Also in terms of, I think this is one of the questions that I had asked follow up to Ambassador Bernard, which is that do we have the right tools in these partnerships to address the current challenges? And I think that is a key question. You know, that I think COVID, the type of challenges that COVID brings out, puts really out there in a very clear manner, and I think as Africans and as Europeans together, this is I think an important discussion to have in terms of taking our partnership forward. So thank you, Pedro. I just want to mention that we were supposed to be joined by, as I said in the beginning, by Mr. Jean-Denis Gabikini, the Acting Director for Economic Development, Trade and Integration of the African Union Commission. But unfortunately, it seems that he has some issues, he has faced some issues regarding the connection to the panel. But I just want to mention that we've been trying to be in touch with him and to get him to join the panel. But if I could now switch back then to you, Bernard. I think many of the comments were addressed to your intervention. I had raised some of my own, but I think it's getting us to a very interesting discussion. I think this is the purpose of a dialogue and this dialogue's outside the formal meetings. You know, we can brainstorm and exchange a bit outside the box. So over to you, Ambassador Quentin. Thank you.
Absolutely, Ambassador Ahmed. Thank you very much, and thank you. Yes, thank you for all the comments. Very interesting. I'm not sure I will be able to address everything, but I took some notes, and sorry, it will be a little bit maybe messy or let's say disorganized in my answers. But I will give you. If not the tools, some material, and then you will be able to reorganize that. Let me say that well, first, it's good to get out of the papers that were well written by my colleagues. So it's definitely not a critic, all the contrary. But on the summit. I think also, Ottilia, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think I said yesterday that what is important in the summit is the build-up to the summit. So I totally agree. I really totally agree. You know, and I don't want to, I'm very loyal to my institution, but I've been here for 6 months. I'm a national diplomat, so I also discover, well, I not totally discover the European Union, that will be wrong. But yes, sometimes, let us state it, sometimes at the EU, we are a little bit too process driven. And that is, and I consider my job and with the colleagues here at the EES, for example, as a diplomatic service, sometimes to be, let's say, a little bit less process driven. Doesn't mean that process is not important, but first politics, and then process when we have political decisions. And yes, those political decisions, they have to be designed together in this in a constant dialogue. I think we have it. Maybe it's not optimal. It certainly could be better. I think that there we have also a common responsibility on building that. What I really try to say also to my colleagues here is that sometimes, because we are process driven and because it is the human nature also, we have the EU, but the EU, it's not the AU. The EU is the sui generis system with a lot of institutions, very integrated. It is not harsh to say that the AU, it's not the same. It's not even that it has the same level of integration. It's not the same kind of institution. So sometimes we try to, one of you say that, to work in parallel, but it's difficult because we are two different ensemble. doesn't mean that we can work ensemble together, but we have to acknowledge that, and definitely we have to work with what we call the REX, because they are important. We know that certain are working better than other ones, but we support that. But let me tell you that the message is really well understood. It is taken on board. It's already we are already working on this mutual approach for design the partnership and certainly the tools, because as you said, in those what we propose on let's say the green transition and so on, it is a reality. You know, I've been posted in Burundi for 3 years, so yes, I know what it is not to have electricity. I know what it is. What we call the agriculture familiale, so well, family agriculture or something like that, and the resilience and all those concepts. But the reality of climate change is really more difficult for people in Burundi than in Belgium or in Europe. I mean, this is a fact. So we have to work together on that. Do we have the tools? It came. I don't know. Allow me to say I don't know. I think we have a lot of tools, but it has to be part of this discussion. Which one are the best? How do we use it? How we adapt it? And let us work together very frankly. I jumped to the debt question you asked, Ahmed, at the beginning. The debt relief, we support the debt relief. I mean, the EU is supporting the debt relief, but we put certain condition. And the condition is the transparency. And allow me, even if it's recorded, I have no problem. I mean, all debt, not only the one to Europe or let's say to America or the one to the Paris Club and so on. All debt have to be taken into account, even the one to major partner like China. So it has to be fair at a certain point. And that's where I say it is of mutual interest. And that's where, and I hope my colleagues will agree with me, that's a message we pass, but it is also a message that has been passed by the African countries to all the partners. Is that, and then as you say, Pedro, I really do think that European Union and its member state, we are a good, even a very good, fair, honest partner for Africa. Maybe we are too shy sometimes. Maybe we are not listening enough. I take that on board. But sometimes maybe you are too shy. Maybe you are too, well, we have to see. No, we have interest. Europe has interest. And one of these interests is to work closer and better with Africa, because it is interest also in the economic interest of Europe, but not to plunder Africa, but to work with a developed Africa. And I finish with that, Ahmed. I'm too long, sorry. I'm a diplomat, it's not my fault. But we speak a lot in Europe of the autonomic strategy, and the COVID-19 has also been a wake-up call for Europe, actually, on our hyper-dependency with other major countries. I already cited one. So now it's time to build back better, to see that we need an economically and fairly developed Africa to make it a valuable economic partner for Europe. And then we can even think to change the paradigm. Why do we have to help African countries in health sector, in education, in agriculture? But not per se, but because we need an Africa that is developed as an economic partner. To be developed as an economic partner, they need people able to work, fed, in good health. So it is in our interest to do that. So I know it may sound vulgar, it may sound too liberal in the economic sense of the term. So I'm slightly getting out of my function of a deputy managing director, but I think that we have to think about that, and really, and there we will propose, as Pedro said, we will propose our, let's say, not our model, but we will propose what we have to propose, and then it will be up to the African people and African countries to choose what's best for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernard. From a diplomat to another, you have been very candid and coming, which I appreciate very much. And I think you give some good answers to some of the points that were raised. We have two questions that came out in the three questions that came out in the chat. Maybe I turn to you, Ottilia, and while you reflect maybe of your closing comments at the same time to the other speakers. Ottilia, there was a question on migration and how can it contribute to peace building in the African continent, and at the same time, I mean, it was also the question was also raised for the EU, and again, how can migration tapped into for peace and security and development in this partnership between Europe and Africa? So that was one set of questions. The other set of questions, one, Pedro mentioned, also we should have mentioned climate change. How can it be more central in this partnership, and particularly the interface with security? We discussed all the time at the Stockholm Forum. So over to you, Ottilia, and maybe Pedro, we will go to the closing remarks if you have anything to add on this, and maybe also then close by you if you have any final comments to make. Ottilia, over to you.
Thank you. So I'll start first with the question around climate change. Now, already in a number of ways, there are bilateral partnerships between European countries and African countries around the green transition more specifically. At the same time, you know, countries like Morocco, even countries across the Sahelian band, offer a lot in terms of the potential for solar energy generation that shouldn't be limited only to those countries, but also to the greater African continent. And increasingly also the potential for that solar energy to be utilized by our neighbors to the north in Europe. The example, of course, of the solar grids in Morocco, essentially powering parts of Europe in the future, is an easy one to make. And I think the partnership on climate issues has to be on two levels. The one level relates to policy and agreement on responsibility sharing and moves towards a green transition. That requires an honest conversation about the balance or the imbalance when it comes to the impact of climate change on the African continent, whether it's the high temperatures across the Sahelian band or into the Horn, or the torrential rains that we are facing here in Southern Africa and in parts of East Africa. These are, you know, very present examples of the impact of climate change on a continent that still needs to develop. The second level is a practical one. It's a lessons sharing and exchanging. I'll use the example of the partnerships that Denmark has been leveraging in pushing for green transitions on the African continent through recycling waste to be able to generate power, but also engaging on the lessons that they've learned in electricity generation through wind farms with their partners here. And those are examples that can be replicated and even multiplied at a continental level. And I think it is about taking it beyond the bilateral to the multilateral level. I'll then end with the question on migration, which I think this has always been the contentious issue between Europe and Africa. On the one hand, Africa sees migration primarily as a development issue, and increasingly for Europe, it is seen as a security issue. And I think there has to be a meeting of minds. The new pact speaks to some of these elements, but it still retains issues relating to the handling of asylum seekers. And perhaps it views African migration or elevates African migration more than it does migration from other regions. And so again, honest conversation between the two partners of the best way forward in that regard. Sorry, Ahmed, I took a bit longer.
Thank you so much. I'll give, Pedro, you have 1 minute, and Bernard, 1 minute if you have any final comments, and we'll have to wrap up afterwards. Thank you so much. 1 minute, Pedro, thank you.
Certainly. Thank you very much. Very final comment. I do believe that what comes out of this discussion is truly how complex the relationship between the EU and Africa still is. And whether we talk about the need to maintain a strategic dialogue to address global challenges, be they peace, security, trade, population flows, or even health crisis, it is a complex relation. I think we should acknowledge that heads on and not pretend that it's not. And as such, challenges, I think, are always bound to surface and to come along the way. But I also think, and this is the very point that the last point that I want to make, I think we do need to make sure that the toolbox that we make available for this purpose of the relation is adapted enough. We need more regular reviews, we need better assessment capacities, and we need more healthy and honest communication with partners on the ground. Otherwise, we'll keep going around in circles in terms of partnership and complaining about not being effective enough or delivering enough to both parties. And I will end with that.
Pedro. Great.
Thank you very much.
So much. Thank you, Pedro. Very good ending comments. Finally, Master Bernard, if you have also very briefly any final comments?
I swear I will be brief. I think no, it is definitely a complex relationship, but it has to be an uninhibited relationship. It sounds better in French, hein? Une relation complexe, mais décomplexée. I think that it's really, for me, key. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, thank you, the three of you. It's been a very rich discussion, and it gives us a lot of food for thought in preparing also for the next Stockholm Forum and how to tackle this issue of partnerships. And maybe we need to think about the retooling and the paradigm shift on partnership for the post-COVID era through these honest conversations. So this is a starter. Thank you so much, and thank you for all the participants. Wonderful to have you. Thank you. Bye-bye.